Everyone in the city knew his name. Zion Mirza, the youngest billionaire in South Asia, owner of a chain of luxury hotels, flashy cars, and a private jet with his name embroidered on the seats. But no one knew he couldn't sleep at night, not because of stress or failure, but because of something far worse. Emptiness. One cold evening, from the top floor of his glass palace, Zion looked down at the street below. A little girl, barefoot and shivering, was selling roses near a traffic signal. She looked no older than 8. Cars passed. People ignored her. Zion couldn't. That night he made a decision billionaires don't make. The next morning, he walked out his mansion, not in his designer suit, not with his assistant or his guards, but in torn slippers and old Corda and dusty trousers. His face was unshaven. His watch was gone. He even left his name behind. He called himself Irfan. For 7 days, he lived on the streets. No one recognized him. He slept under bridges, stood in food lines, worked as a laborer for 300 rupees, and spoke to people society had forgotten. He met Rayhan, a 12-year-old boy who shined shoes all day and gave his earnings to his mother with cancer. He met Amra, a widow running a tea stall to raise her 2 daughters. He met Khalid, an old cobbler who had stitched 10,000 shoes but could barely afford sandals himself. Zion didn't just listen to their stories. He felt their pain. He had dined with presidents, but had never tasted hunger. He had bought skyscrapers, but had never understood the cost of a single brick for a poor man. Now he did. On the 8th day, he vanished. A week later, things started to change. Fast. Rayhan found out his mother's treatment was fully paid at the best hospital. Amra's tea stall suddenly got a brand new setup with free supplies for 1 year. Khalid was offered a position at a shoe company as a quality trainer with 5 times the salary he'd ever seen. And across the street, a giant banner appeared. This street matters. These people matter. Signed, Zion Mirza. The world was shocked. When reporters asked him why a billionaire would live like a beggar, he said just one thing. You can't fix wounds you've never touched. You can't change lives you've never lived with. Real help begins when you stop looking down and start walking beside. Since then, every year, Zion disappears for 1 week. No security, no cameras, no charity shows. Just in dusty streets and forgotten people. Because sometimes you need to take off your crown to feel someone else's pain. Because sometimes the richest man isn't the one who gives money. It's the one who gives himself. He stood in the middle of a broken street, dust swirling around his feet, watching a boy no older than 10 tie together torn plastic bags to make shoes. Just days ago, he had been in an air-conditioned boardroom, signing a deal worth millions. Today, he was wearing clothes that smelled of smoke, sweat, and streets, not because he had lost everything, but because he had chosen to walk away from it for a little while. Zion Mirza had always been rich. Not just comfortable, rich, private jets, mansions in 3 countries. His life was the kind people scrolled past in envy on Instagram. But there was a strange silence behind the success, an emptiness that echoed louder every time he laughed. He had spent his life building towers, but now he couldn't even look into the eyes of the people walking below them. Something changed in him the day he saw a little girl barefoot, trying to sell roses in the middle of traffic, dodging speeding cars like it was a game. He didn't see her as a stranger. He saw her as someone who had been invisible to the world for too long. And he realized he was part of that world, the one that only looked down. So he did the unthinkable. He removed his branded jacket, gave up his Rolex. He left his phone behind, his name behind. No guards, no press, no announcement. Just a worn-out shirt, torn slippers, and a heart ready to learn. In the eyes of everyone he would meet, he was no longer a billionaire. He was just another face among the forgotten. That's when it all began. He sat beside people on footpaths who had stories written in the lines on their faces. He listened to a boy who worked 12 hours a day so his younger sister could go to school. He heard a woman speak of selling her wedding ring to feed her family. These weren't sob stories begging for sympathy. They were lives, lived with strength, pride, and pain. What struck Zion most wasn't the poverty itself. It was the dignity with which they endured it. A tea seller refused to charge him for a cup because by latte ho, that gay ho, a child shared the only biscuit he had. An old man offered his own piece of cloth when Zion sat on hot cement. These people had nothing, and yet they gave, not because they were rich, but because their hearts were. Zion had donated to causes before. He had written checks and built foundations. But this was different. This was not help from a distance. This was eye level. This was real. That week, something inside him shifted. He realized that you can't understand someone's pain by reading a report. You can't fix a broken system by sitting in a glass tower. You can't give dignity to the poor if you've never dared to walk among them. The richest hearts are not the ones that give the most money. They're the ones that dare to feel, to walk in the dirt, to sit on the floor, to look someone in the eye without judgment. The richest hearts don't live above the world. They live within it. It's easy to sign a check and think you've done something good. It's hard to sit beside a man who hasn't eaten in 2 days and offer your own bread. It's easy to post about charity on social media. It's harder to listen quietly to someone's story without ever telling them who you are. That's what Zion did. He didn't tell anyone he was a billionaire. He didn't take photos. He didn't record videos for views. He simply lived among them. And what he received in return was far more than what he gave. He received stories, truths, hugs, smiles that weren't bought, they were earned. He realized that people don't always need your money. Sometimes they just need to be seen. Sometimes they just need to know they matter. And when someone rich enough to buy a city chooses to live like he owns nothing, just to feel what others feel, something powerful happens. The world shifts a little. Dignity returns. Humanity breathes. Because the richest hearts are often not in the mansions, not in the luxury cars, not on magazine covers. They're the ones who choose to walk to the dust with those the world tries to forget, quietly, humbly, sincerely. And when you do that, not only do you change their lives, you change your own. It's easy to believe that helping people is about giving them something they don't have: money, clothes, food, a job. That's what we've been taught, that if you're in a position of wealth or comfort, then your role is to give. But the truth is deeper. The truth is harder. Real help, the kind that truly transforms someone's life, doesn't come from your wallet. It comes from your willingness to understand, to feel, and to be present in someone else's pain. It doesn't start with donation boxes or grand gestures. It starts when you sit down beside someone and listen, not to respond, but to understand. Zion Mirza learned that not through books or boardrooms, but through walking the streets in worn-out sandals, without a penny in his pocket, with no one around to recognize his name. For a man who had everything the world could offer, it wasn't the giving that taught him the meaning of life. It was the listening. It was the time he spent in silence, learning what it means to struggle for a single meal, to protect your dignity when your stomach is empty, to smile at others even when your own heart is breaking. He had been a giver all his life. Sponsored charities, food drives. His name was on the walls of orphanages and hospitals. And yet, those were things done from a distance. He never felt them. He never saw the faces of the people who received what he gave. He didn't know what a cold night felt like without a blanket, or what a mother feels when she skips dinner just to save her child from sleeping hungry. He had spent millions helping people without ever knowing their stories. But the moment he chose to live as one of them, to drop his identity, to silence his power, to walk the road barefoot, that's when he truly began to help. He met a rickshaw driver who had a daughter in school and 2 sons with medical conditions. The man worked 16 hours a day and still couldn't afford his rent. Zion asked him, "Why don't you quit?" The man smiled and said, "Because they depend on me. I may be tired, but I'm still standing." That wasn't just survival. That was love in motion. He met a young girl working at a roadside dhaba. Her hands were calloused, her voice tired. She had dreams of becoming a nurse, but she hadn't seen a school in 3 years. Zion asked her if she was angry at life. She looked at him and said, "No, I'm grateful I can help my mother stand on her feet." That wasn't weakness. That was strength born of sacrifice. These weren't people who needed a savior. They needed someone who understood. They needed someone who wouldn't just give money and walk away, but someone who would stand beside them in the rain and say, I see you. I feel this with you. Because that's what real help is. It's not just about solving problems. It's about restoring dignity. It's not about charity. It's about connection. When Zion returned to his world of luxury, he didn't return the same. He didn't just write checks anymore. He built relationships. He didn't just donate funds. He showed up. He visited homes. He remembered names. He followed up. And the people he helped didn't feel like cases or projects. They felt like humans, valued, heard, and respected. Because real help doesn't make someone feel smaller. It doesn't create a gap between the giver and the receiver. It creates a bridge. It says, I'm with you, not above you. Zion didn't need to give them millions. He needed to give them his presence, his attention, his willingness to say, your life matters to me. You see, money can buy comfort, but it can't heal pain. Food can fill a stomach, but it can't fill a heart. And clothes can cover a body, but they can't restore hope. But when someone takes the time to understand your story, to walk beside you without judgment, that's when something powerful happens. That's when people begin to believe in themselves again. Real help doesn't just change someone's situation. It changes their spirit. It tells them they're not alone, that their pain matters, that someone, somewhere, didn't just look down and feel pity. They stepped down and felt their struggle. That's the kind of help that creates change that lasts. That's the kind of help that doesn't just leave behind relief. It leaves behind respect. Certainly. Here's an 800-word impactful and inspirational conclusion to the story. He dressed like a poor man to help them, build on powerful morals, emotion, and a tone suitable for all ages. This conclusion will inspire, challenge, and move listeners and readers, not only to reflect, but to act. The world often teaches us that success is measured by how much you have. How many zeros are in your bank account? How many people work under your name? How high you've climbed? How big your house stands? But in the quiet corners of broken streets, and in the tired eyes of those who fight silent battles each day, a different truth exists. Success means nothing if your heart has never been touched by someone else's pain. Zion Mirza discovered this truth when he stripped away every layer of comfort, wealth, and recognition, not to prove a point, but to feel what others live through. And through that journey, he gained something far greater than all the luxuries he owned. He found the meaning of being human. The beauty of Zion's story is not just in what he did, but in what it teaches us to do. Because this story isn't just about a billionaire. It's about you, me, all of us, asterisk, asterisk. It's about whether we're willing to look beyond our own world and step into someone else's shoes. Not just once, but again and again until it becomes a habit, a part of who we are. We live in a world where people are hungry for many things. Some are hungry for food, some for opportunity, some for a kind word, for someone to notice that they exist. Some are starving for dignity. You may not be rich in wealth, but you might be rich in time, in empathy, in the power to listen, in the ability to smile at someone who feels invisible. Never underestimate that power. We often wait for the perfect moment to help, for when we have more money, more influence, more followers, more freedom. But the truth is, the smallest gesture given with sincerity can become the turning point in someone's life. A glass of water, a hand on the shoulder, a simple, "Are you okay?" These are not small things. They are everything. Zion didn't save the whole world. He didn't eliminate poverty. He didn't build 1,000 schools in a day. But he showed up. He walked in the rain with those the world forgot. He saw people's lives not as numbers or problems to be solved, but as stories worth knowing. And that, more than anything else, became the miracle. Because real change never starts from grand speeches. It starts from genuine connection. It begins when someone chooses to care without expecting applause. It begins when someone says, "Your pain is not your burden to carry alone." It begins when we start treating each other as people, not positions. The biggest myth of our time is that only the rich can help the poor. The truth is, only the understanding can help the broken. You don't need to have a big house to shelter someone for a while. You don't need to be a millionaire to change someone's future. You just need a heart that's willing to feel and hands that are willing to act. Zion came back from the streets with a completely different kind of wealth, one that no one could measure and no one could steal. He had learned that being truly rich means being rich in compassion, in humility, in courage to step into pain without fear of getting dirty. And what he gave wasn't charity. It was respect. What he offered wasn't sympathy. It was solidarity. He didn't look down and say, "Let me save you." He stood beside them and said, "I see you. I hear you. I will walk with you." This is the moral the world desperately needs to remember. We don't have to be perfect to make a difference. We just have to be present. Asterisk, asterisk. No act of kindness is ever wasted. No seed of compassion dies. It may not go viral. It may not be broadcasted, but it leaves behind footprints in people's hearts. Quiet reminders that goodness still exists in a noisy world. If Zion had written a check from the comfort of his mansion, it would have helped, sure, but it would not have transformed lives. What transformed lives was his choice to see the unseen, to feel what others feel, act from a place of shared humanity, not superiority. So now, the question is not what Zion did. The question is, what will you do? Asterisk, asterisk. Will you wait until you have everything? Or will you start with what you already have? Your voice, your eyes, your time, your heart? Because maybe, just maybe, the world doesn't need another billionaire. It needs more human beings who are willing to walk with others when the world walks away. And if you're willing to do that, even once, you'll realize something beautiful. You didn't just help someone else. You found the richest part of yourself.